Welcome to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast.
Supercharged by Amped Outdoors Lithium.
Catch more fish.
Learn tips, tricks,
Techniques. Secrets. And decades of angler's wisdom. Welcome to the show.
Today, anglers fish longer. Today, anglers fish harder. Today, anglers rely more than ever on their electronics. It all comes down to catching more fish, and today, anglers rely on Amped Outdoors lithium batteries, period.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. Sorry about my camera. I swear, every time before showtime, the computer wants to give me problems. So we're just going with the regular camera. It's not 4K, but it'll do. Oh, sorry about that. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. Got the mic on. Unfortunately, I am on the laptop camera. My other camera wouldn't connect. But anyways, we're live. We're here. I think the only issue is we are not live on Facebook, which, the page, which I'll do that here in a second. So today we have Roger Hinchcliff joining us. If you're not familiar with Roger, he's probably done more seminars on Steelhead than any other person on planet Earth. So you guys are really in for a treat. I hope you brought your questions and your comments, because Roger's a wealth of knowledge. So we should get some good education out of this one. So what I'll do is let's go ahead and bring Roger in. Hey, Raj.
Hey,
how you doing, buddy?
I'm good.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Jace. Just great.
Right on.
So how you doing today?
Pretty good. I'm home. I don't hit the road again until I don't know. I think Monday I'll be on an airplane. But yeah.
Where are you heading?
I'm going to be heading to the West Coast, and then I come back, and then I have another consumer show that I'm doing, the Ultimate Fishing Show in Novi in Michigan. So,
Oh, that'll be cool. You know,
yeah.
I've always wanted to go out to the Novi show.
It's a great show. If you've never been, I highly recommend you come. And they have it in January every year, and sometimes the bad weather can keep people from, like downstate or across the Ohio border from driving up. But if the weather's good and you can make the journey, you should come to the show. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it looks like a big show.
It is.
Might
Yeah,
have to-
it's a big show. No doubt about it.
Might have to check that out next year.
Yeah, you should try to make it out if you can. So
why don't we get started? Just introduce yourself and tell the audience just kind of a little bit about you.
well, at the end of the day, I put my waders on just like everybody else, one leg at a time. I don't profess to be a know-it-all at all. It's a lifelong journey. If there's anybody out there that thinks they know everything about fishing, I'll look them straight in the eye and tell them that you don't, because it's a lifelong journey. And, a lot of times, I give opinions and I also state some facts. And at the end of the day, I just try to help people to catch more fish. And that's what I've done my whole career, is just try to help anglers catch more fish. And that's what I do.
Are you still there? I
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
lose
here.
you, Dave. Oh, sorry. While you were talking, I was sharing the stream over, and it came through twice. So
Oh, I got you.
sorry about that. Technical difficulties. I am pretty much sliding in here full speed today. I was out on the water with Mike Kearney, shooting
Oh,
some videos. So it was a pretty important day. We had a great day on the water, and literally got here about 45 minutes ago. So
nice.
sorry about the rough start for this one. So one thing that I realized, because I like to do a lot of research, at least as much as I can.
Uh-huh.
When I started going through your stuff, I realized, that's hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and probably days of podcasts. So I started getting through some of them. There's just so much knowledge there. So, if you're not familiar, I mean, definitely jump over to YouTube or Google anywhere and just search Roger Hinchcliff and check out some of his videos, some of his articles, because they'll blow your mind. And a couple of things that I wanted to talk about is one of the things that you brought up was the biology of a steelhead and barometric pressure.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could break that down for us.
Well, I mean, the biology of the steelhead, it depends on what you want to talk about, because there's there's a lot to unpack there with the fish. At the end of the day, what most folks don't realize is most of these fish that are in the streams are not eating. That's a big misconception that these fish all of them are eating. Some do, but the majority of these fish do not eat. Their stomach shrinks to make room for the milt and the eggs. And I've told people, if you do harvest the fish for maybe the smoker or for the grill, whenever I catch any fish, it doesn't matter what it is. I always look at the stomach contents, because I want to know what the fish are eating, try to get a better understanding of what's currently going on. But you'll find one of two things: either no food at all or completely undigested food. And so what happens with the fish is when they come into the river, their job is to conserve energy. They're genetically programmed to go to that bottom, where the bottom current is slower than the top current, right? And they do that to conserve energy because they're not eating. And in our case, like in Michigan, we'll pick on Michigan. We have the Manistee strain, which is a spring run fish. Well, technically, they don't have to run in the fall. They don't have to come up until the spring, right? But when you
Right.
get the right cues for these fish to come up, the right temps and the daylight photo periods and the right temperatures, a lot of them will come up, and some of them will winter over all the way till the spring. Now, there's also fish that go back. They come up and then they drop back and go back to the lake and stage and then turn around and come back again. But there's just a lot of factors with these fish, and with the metabolism of the fish. It's directly related to their memory spans. Fish have memory spans, and a lot of people are in complete, utter denial that that's not a thing, but it is a thing. Scientists have proved it, from bass to rainbow trout. And these fish do have memory spans, and they get educated. And that's why, as the season wears on, it can get harder and harder to catch that fish, because more than likely the fish that hit your bait or you caught was a high metabolism fish, a willful biter, and then you take your photo with it, you didn't meat locker it up, and you release it like I do. Well, you just educated that fish. Now that fish could turn around and bite again in 5 minutes, right? Or that same fish might not bite again for another 30 days, right? But I've caught the same fish over and over again. But what happens is, like the slow metabolism fish that have the longest memory span, they might not bite for 90 days, right? And so what happens is we're home to the world's largest steelhead population on Earth, but we're also home to the world's largest angling population. And so what happens is these fish get pressured, and that's why you need a high water event, a temperature event, as the season wears on, to bring you more fresh fish that haven't been educated. And guys that have been fishing a long time, that's why they'll drop down in leader size, because these fish can get line shy and biting. And that's because they've been educated. And they also have seen everything, right? They've seen beads and bags and plugs and spinners and you name it. It's been going by them, you know. And so they
Exactly.
and so I like different.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is that's anybody that's ever fished overseas in like Europe or anything like that. You can see for a fact that these fish have memory, not just steelhead, but any fish. You go over like Italy, for example, and a buddy of mine produces baits for tubertini, and he said he'll make a bait first time he takes it out and just whacks them. You know, day 2 he takes it out and catches maybe 30% of the fish. Day 3 they won't even touch it.
Yeah. Well, if truth be told, people that follow me personally, maybe not on my public, social media pages, know that I'm a huge carp fisherman, and I absolutely love carp. Now, I don't eat carp, but I love to catch them and release them. And a carp is the smartest freshwater fish we got. They have the largest memory span of any freshwater fish, and that's why in Europe, the carp is kind of like the world's game fish over there, because they can become extremely difficult to catch. And I think here in the Great Lakes, because we have so many steelhead in our streams, I'm not saying that, you can't catch fish. You most certainly can. But those ones that winter over, they do get educated, so.
Right.
And that's why I like to use a variety of tactics or colors or profile sizes to try to give them something that they haven't seen,
Exactly. And another thing that you had mentioned was the bottom current. If you're in Northeast Ohio, definitely take a trip out to Cold Creek. The Steelhead hatchery. They're open on the weekends. You can't go there and fish unless you win the lottery, which it's like fishing in an aquarium. Great for the kids or somebody new to fly fishing or something like that. But just go and observe these fish in their natural environment. And that was the first time that I noticed exactly what you're saying, Roger. They drop down to the bottom of the water column. And a lot of times it's like in a little bit of a hole that's cut around the vegetation, or just somewhere where they can get out of that current. Because you got to think about it. If a fish has to exhaust more energy to eat the meal than the meal produces, it's not sustainable, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. The steelhead is 8 inches off the bottom most of the time in a stream setting. Most rivers are only 4 to 8 feet deep. We do have some rivers, especially out west, they get way deeper than that. But we do have some rivers here in Michigan, for example, where you can find water that's deeper than 8 feet. But most of the time, they're right on the bottom. And the only time they're not on the bottom is during the drop back phase, which is another whole seminar. That's after they're done spawning and they're heading back to the Great Lakes. But yeah, they're on the bottom and they're there for a reason, and that's to conserve the energy, right? Because they're really not eating while they're in the stream. So
one thing that I heard you say was steelhead are the fastest freshwater fish in the world.
yes, yeah, they can move 26 feet a second.
That's I still can't even fathom that.
Yeah, well, if you've ever, I've had the luxury of being able to fish all over North America for them, and I've got to fish for different strains. But if you've ever felt the power, the sheer raw power of the Skamania strain, those fish are, oh my God. The things and listen, a fresh fish, it doesn't matter where you're at. A fresh fish with a high fat factor and the right water temperature, man, they're going to fight. I've hooked 5 and 7 pounders and I'm like, oh my God, this has got to be a double digit fish. I start to get it closer so I get an eye on it and come to find out it's only a 5 to 7 pound fish, man. They just pull that hard, So, and that's part of the allure, right? They're called a fish of 1,000 casts. And I think what allures people to steelhead is one, they're steelhead. They can be very difficult to catch sometimes. If they don't want to bite, they're not going to bite. They're definitely beautiful creatures. I mean, when you look, you can't see. Not one steelhead looks exactly the same, from the spotting and the markings, and they have general characteristics, that look the same. But to me, they're kind of like a brown trout. Every one of them is special, and they all are just beautiful in a certain way. But with that and the sheer speed, and then obviously if you get one that likes to be what I call the cartwheeling evil, where they like to come out of the water like a big bass does and shake the hook. There's just so many things about them that draws people to them, and I thank God for them every day. I absolutely love steelhead.
They are so much fun, especially when they're super active. I've noticed, warmer days, maybe warmer water, but I don't know enough to know exactly what that number is. Because one of the things that you said was the water temperature and the fat factor dictate how hard the fish fight. So
Yes.
What is that optimal water temperature for the best fight?
Well, if you want the best fighting steelhead, you want that 50 plus degree water, right? Between 50, 54 degrees. You're going to have all you can handle. And I don't care if it's a 5, 7, 10 pounder, like your Skamania fish, they average 10 pounds. That's the average for them, but they spend 4 years out in the Great Lakes instead of 2 or 3, and they have a higher fat factor. But yeah, water temperature is also going to dictate everything that you do to catch these fish, period. Water temperature, you got to know it, right? And not all streams that have the gauges, the stream flow gauges, not all of them actually give you water temperature readings. And that's why with today, I mean, you can buy a stream thermometer for what, $8? You can probably even get one cheaper than that and throw that thing in the water. Now on my jet sled, I have the surface temp on my electronics and stuff, but you want to know what that temperature is because that's going to dictate what you're going to do as an angler, right? What kind of water you're going to fish and where you're likely to find fish,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think Do you think a sunny day has anything to do with it?
Well, that's another misconception. You know, I got contacted from people all around the world. I did a podcast. I don't know. It's been a couple years ago.
Is that the Steelhead don't wear sunglasses?
Yeah, Steelhead don't wear sunglasses. And man, did I like upset the world with that thing. But more people contacted me and went, wow, that makes total sense what you're saying. And so, I can give you a quick rundown of it because we only got so much time. We could spend an hour on one subject, but at the end of the day, Steelhead don't wear sunglasses. So if you're driving in your car facing in the sun, you can't see, right? That's why you need sunglasses, or you got to put your visor down, right? Well, Steelhead don't have that luxury. And so they're used to cold, dark, deep water, either out west in the ocean or in the Great Lakes. Mother Nature pushes them up, right, into the stream, right? And which is typically 48 feet of water. And what happens is they're blinded by that UV light. You know, they can see 60% of that light is UV. They can see that. You and I can't see that unless we use a UV light to bring that out, right? And so in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is if you held up the ping pong ball in front of you, in front of the sun, you can't see it. If I gave you a basketball, larger profile size, you can see that because it's larger. And so what a lot of guys thought was, well, it's a bright, sunshiny day, and that's why I didn't catch as many fish. And I'm not saying that doesn't factor into that. But what I am saying is you should have been fishing a larger profile bait to help the fish help you so they can see it. And that's why on the West Coast, they've always used, they use beads, really big beads. And it wasn't until that podcast, and I've been telling people this stuff for years, but it wasn't until that podcast that a lot of guys put that together, that the larger profile on a bright, sunny day may be the ticket to getting bit, because guys, they don't get it. The fish they can't see it. And if the fish can't see it, right, you got to help them, right? That's going to help you catch more fish. And that's right. On a bright, sunshiny day. And then the other thing, if you want me to just keep going here, you ask the regular guy why pink and chartreuse is such a great color for steelhead. And you're going to get all kinds of different answers. And then some guys know. But naturally, the color pink, the color chartreuse naturally is inherently fluorescent, right? And you hit it with the UV light. That's why, it works so well that the fish are actually seeing it, right? It's kind of like the green bead. Years ago, people laughed and made fun of us for fishing green beads. Ain't no steelhead, egg, green, and all. Every bead company now all makes a green bead. Why? Because it works. They can see it. You know what I mean? And then obviously too, the other things that you have that affect the fishing or their ability to see it is what we call wind ripple and water ripple, right? Wind ripple and water ripple. A river is an ever moving place unless you're in a deep, slow pool in the winter, but it's still moving. And what happens is when that sunlight hits those, the current, the light gets thrown all different directions. And so if you master color, size, profile, depth, I don't care who you are, you're going to catch a lot more fish, in my opinion. So, and depth is one of the most crucial overlooked things or mistakes that I see a lot of novice anglers doing, is not adjusting their depth enough, right?
Right.
Colder temps, you got to get it in their face, right?
So, that's a perfect point. once you get those things dialed in, um, how would you tell a novice or a newbie how to approach the river to identify where the fish are actually going to be at that point in time in those conditions?
Yeah, well, they're steelhead. They're nervous creatures. They're constantly on the move, right? So you can go to a section of the stream and you can catch those fish and just have a great day on the river. You go back the following day and those fish may not be there, right? They could still be there, but they just moved around that hole or the run based on the current flow, whether it went up or went down. Or they could be miles up the river, right? Because they're always on the move. Now, one of my favorite times to fish for steelhead is in the winter time, because that's when they put the brakes on based on the water temp, right? They put the brakes on and they'll stack up in those slow moving pools, and they're easier to target. But what I would tell a guy, if you're new to steelhead fishing, the first thing you want to do is study the water. That's your first thing. You need to study the water that you're about to fish. And one of the easiest things is the bubble line. Look for a bubble line. Foam is home. A lot of guys have heard that one through the years. It's been on the stream. And, maybe there's a fallen tree or there's a boulder and you'll see a current break. Well, those fish, their job is to conserve energy. So they're always going to go where there's a current break. And I would just tell guys, when you get there, your first job is to identify the section of water that you anticipate them fish to be holding at. And then your second job is to determine the depth and present the bait correctly, or the lure, and try to make sure you're getting down into that zone. And, constantly be playing with your depth. You might go a couple inches at a time. And eventually what you want to do is maybe see a stutter once in a while, just a little stutter from the float. That way you're down in the zone in their face, right?
Picking off the bottom, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to make it so deep where you're getting hung up and losing gear.
Right.
But it brings me to another point. If you're not breaking off leaders, you ain't fishing deep enough. Sorry. And that's just my opinion. But you should be losing leaders throughout the day. And that sucks. It's all part of it. But that, to me, that tells me you're getting down to where the fish really are, Now, during the drop back phase, right, them fish can be 2 feet off the bottom. They're like little kids. They're in the stream. They'll just eat anything, right? One guy on the manifesto years ago took a McDonald's pickle, right, and caught a steelhead on a McDonald's pickle off a cheeseburger, man. They'll eat anything at that point, but that's when their metabolism, their thyroxine levels, which is a hormone that kind of dictates what they do. When that stuff gets kicked back into gear, Mother Nature's telling them, look, you did your job. You spawned. You did what you're supposed to do. Now it's time to eat and put on the calories, And
right.
At the end of the day, though, the majority of that time, let's say from late September, first week of October, all the way through late spring, your job is to try to find that fish and get the bait down in their face,
You got somebody at the door, Raj.
Nope, that was not me.
Oh, who do we got here?
Bear.
Pretty nice deer there.
We're here.
Hey, John.
Hey, buddy. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
Let me adjust just a little. How's that? That work?
We got Roger. You remember Atlee in North Carolina?
Yes.
Atlee remembers you. He's got a nice fly rod right there behind us.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's all.
went out and tried. We went out and tried it out, and I'm telling you, I've got well, we're on air, so right over here in front of me, I've got a rod I bought a while ago. It's one of those that the brand that starts with an O. And I was curious to compare this Lamaglass rod with it.
Yes.
I've been a trout fisherman of sorts for over 50 years. And Atlee went down there and he was working that rod. And I said, let me try it. So he handed me, grab that one. Let's let folks see it. He handed me this one. And with my old fly line and not the best equipment, I guess, but man, that thing was laying the cast out.
That's awesome.
We went down on the river. I just can't believe how smooth it is. The technology is incredible.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. I appreciate the compliments. Lamaglass is basically the godfather of the fishing rod. We've been around a long time. And when Chuck was telling me the story about your grandson there, I said, you know what? Let's help that kid. He deserves a new rod. So
he's all about fishing and hunting, and well, we all are, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I've already learned something listening to you here. You say 26 feet per second?
Yeah, steelhead. Yep. Depending on the strain, they can really move some gas.
I would have never guessed that. I've never caught a steelhead. We have rainbow brown and brook trout here.
Yeah.
The brook trout, actually, most people here call them speckle.
Yes. Yeah.
My understanding, they're actually an Arctic char and not a trout at all.
Oh,
but
I see.
Our climate right here at our elevation is just like southern Canada.
Okay.
So we've got cold water and the trout and the snow and the whole 9 yards. And recently we had a lot of rain.
Oh yeah, you guys had some rain, no doubt.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
just right here behind me, 3 miles behind me, a friend of mine, and he's a land surveyor. He knows how to measure. He had rain gauge, and during the event, he measured 39 inches.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine.
And here in our county, it's the highest mountain this side of the Rockies. So when that kind of water falls, it goes downhill fast. And now our stream channels look like something you'd see in the Himalayas.
Oh, no kidding. Right.
Huge rock bars and U-shape.
Yeah.
And no trees on the side. And all of us who love to trout fish here are getting kind of concerned, not more than kind of concerned. We're really concerned about what's going to happen to the water temperatures with the trees gone.
Yeah, during the summer.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that works out for you. And I really appreciate you thinking of me and thanking me for that gift. Lamaglass was more than happy to give that young man that rod for all the hard work he was doing for the cleanup. And I told the girls at the office, and they said, absolutely, let's help that young man. So, we got to have the kids for our future, right? So,
yep.
Oh, that just tickled him to death.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Chuck and all he's done, and Yak Attack and all the other people, my goodness, Yak Attack just, you talk about a company stepping up. Now that's very impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Well, the angling community is filled with good people, right?
1,000%.
People. So
I was thinking about that. I didn't, we haven't seen any help from a lot of other corporations. Mm-hmm. The hunters, the fishermen, just the ordinary people. The government hasn't really been here.
Yes.
Insurance companies have been just a joke. And but people like you have absolutely made a difference in ways you don't even know. So it's just been awesome.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. You know, and it at the end of the day, you're only as good as the future generation. So you just try to be the change you want to see in the world, and you know they pay it forward. And we look back
Well,
one day, and everything is much better.
this guy here, he is a worker. I'm telling you. He, in fact, he just got off the tractor.
Oh, wow.
I've got a 50 horsepower Kubota, and we've been down there doing some cleanup today. He ran the tractor, and I ran the skid steer.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
he prefers to run the skid steer.
Yeah. Well, he's getting raised right. That's good. That's good stuff. We can all get behind that.
He
So
loves to work. When he's finished working, he loves to fish. We're going to try to get up there and let him hook into some of those big ones. Like I say, I've caught a lot of trout.
Yeah.
One year I kept count when I was in high school, and I only fished for the native speckle. And by June the 1st, I had caught 1,200 and something,
Wow.
and didn't keep any of those. Now the fish, well, most of them are 6 inches. And I did catch one that was 6 ounces short of the state record. It was 12 degrees that day, and I went up the river here and busted a hole in the ice. And being the purist that I was, I put some whole kernel of corn on a hook and threw it out there and caught a nearly 4-pound brookie.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Very good.
It
Very nice.
was fun. But
that's awesome. You know, the next question is one that I think is going to help us all catch fish. Uh, at least me personally, I guess I didn't realize how much of a difference it could make. And that's the water absorption on your line.
Yes. So you want me to talk about that or?
Yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah.
explain it a little bit. And my question really, so if it makes a difference in float fishing, I mean, I don't have a whole lot of experience float fishing for steelhead. Generally, I like to be away from the crowds. But if it absorbs water in float fishing, it's going to absorb water with any fishing. I mean, it's just line absorbs water, right? So how will that impact other presentations? You know, float fishing, casting, trolling. Do you think it will have an impact there? And just kind of break down the whole line absorb.
Yeah, well, it really depends on the type of line that you're using. You know, is it fluorocarbon? Is it mono? Is it braid? We use a combination of all of those lines with various techniques to catch the fish. At the end of the day, all lines have an absorption rate of anywhere between 15 to 35%. And where it really affects the float fishing guy is when, again, we were talking about how the fish are pressured, they get educated, they know what's called current speed, they know how fast things should be going by them, right? And if it's too slow or if it's too fast, right, that could cost you not getting a bite. On the float fishing side, what happens is at the top, what you want to do is the angler that mends the least amount of mends, the least disturbance to the float, depending on the technique, because there is things with like jig fishing where I like to give my jig action, but in certain situations. But what happens is when you go to lift that line up and mend the line and set it behind the float, if the majority of that's in the water, number one, you're slowing your presentation down too much because it's a drag, right? And then when you go to mend that line, you actually disturb the presentation, right? And sometimes when you're fishing in cold water, we're talking like in the 30s, right? Like out west, the rivers very rarely get below 38 degrees. But here, like especially in Michigan, in the month of January, I mean, most of the time we're at 33 degrees because it's cold enough. Right now, that might not be the case because we got a heat wave and all the snow melted and we got rain. But what happens is what I like to do, there's a product called mucilin. It's basically just a silicone fly dressing. Fish USA sells it. It's an excellent product. I don't fish for them. I'm not on the pro staff. They don't send me a free applicator pad of it or any of that. I don't get nothing, any of that from free from them. It's made in England. But I'll put that 6 feet above my float on the main line. And what happens is it causes that water to ride extremely high in the water column. And when I go to do what's called a soft mend, not a hard mend, a soft, quiet mend. Sometimes I call them quiet mends, where I just barely lift up that the line out of the water and set it behind the float, right? So it's behind the float. With less disturbance to the presentation. Because when you get into these really cold water temperatures, these fish, they're alive and they're swimming, but it's almost like they're in a zombie coma, right? That water is so cold, their metabolism is so slow, it becomes a game of inches. And if you got a hard mend and pull that thing 12 inches out of the strike zone, you might have just lost a fish. Just my opinion. So, yeah, line absorbs water and it can affect how many fish you catch, in my opinion. So,
And do you think it has an effect, say, like when you're casting or when you're trolling? You know, once that line absorbs water, I mean, it's gonna.
yeah, it's no different. I mean, sure it does. I mean, it's no different than the line diameter itself, right? If the line diameter is larger, it's going to impede the action or the speed of the lure. Now, I can't give you any scientific data or where somebody has actually tested the speed or the wiggle of the lure. But for me, the only time that I really pay attention to that is when I'm float fishing and I'm trying to get that line to ride right up on the very top of the surface and not kind of sink just barely below it. You know what I mean? Because that's dragging the presentation.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So another thing that I wanted to talk about is line diameter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, most of us, you know, obviously you think visibility, right? A bigger line diameter is going to be more visible and maybe deter more fish. Maybe you can build on that. And what other factors does line diameter affect other than visibility?
Well, so me personally, I mean, there's guys that they all have their own theories. There's people that's put data and tests out there, and they think that fluorocarbon is just it's a sales tool and hype and this and that. Now, first, let me just tell you, you can tell by looking at me, I'm only 28, right? You can tell how young I look. You know, you're all supposed to laugh right now. Years ago, before fluorocarbon, what did we have? We had mono. Now, I'll be the first to tell you without, again, I mean, I can just go in all these different directions. You know, we have a vertical presentation and then we have a horizontal presentation. And so when you're fishing with a bead or you're fishing with a bag, we're fishing a horizontal presentation. That's where the mono, right, because it's neutral buoyant, kind of help you get that bait in the strike zone. But me personally, if you've ever been to my house, some of the people that know me or fished with me, they've heard through the years about the Steelhead shed. And that's when my kids were younger and my wife, they all made fun of me because I used to do all these experiments, right? I wanted like hook penetration. I used different things to figure out hook penetration, and I would measure, how many pounds of pressure are at the hook, and I would do tests with lighting and different colors, and I would check all kinds of things. Well, I got my own personal kind of test that I did on fluorocarbon for light absorption or the pass through of light. And to me, with a blue LED light, to me, hands down, fluorocarbon is one of the best gifts that's ever been given to the angler. Now, there's some folks that don't believe in that, and they'll fish mono till they die, and good for you. Okay, good for you. But like if you get up to a dam and there's a fish barrier, the dam, those fish can't go any further. And that's what I call a fish bowl. The fish get stacked up there, and the anglers just pound on them day after day after day after day. I can assure you a smaller diameter fluorocarbon is going to help you get bit. Whether you want to believe me or not, I can assure you that's the case. Now, with fluorocarbon, there's not very many factories on planet Earth that actually manufacture fluorocarbon. There's 10 different stiffnesses to fluorocarbon, and you need to find the right fluorocarbon that's got the right stiffness, right? Steelhead anglers most of the time want a more supple fluorocarbon that's going to help you with that horizontal presentation to help that bead tumble and fall and raise and lift. And if you're going to buy a fluorocarbon, you want to buy a Japanese fluorocarbon, period. The Japanese make the finest fluorocarbon on planet Earth. And for the guys like my friends in Pennsylvania and Ohio and New York that say, hey, man, I can't get bit if I don't run 6 pound leader. I can't get bit if I don't run 6 pound leader. Yeah, I get it because you're fishing for overfished fish. But with today's technology, you can actually get a line that's rated for 10 pounds breaking strength. That's a 6 pound diameter. So why would you even use 6 pounds, right? Unless you want to be that guy that, well, I went 1 for 5 today. Why break off and lose the fish? So with today's lines, we have the best lines we've ever been given. And I think line diameter is very important, especially on pressured fish. Early in the season, in my opinion, I don't think it matters at all. Them fish are brand new, fresh out of the lake, out of the ocean. They're still chewing. They're willing to bite and do their thing. But as that season wears on and the winter, we get low, clear water, that stealthier approach is going to help you catch more fish.
Interesting. So I know you do a lot of bead fishing and centerpin fishing.
Yeah.
So first, I don't know a whole lot about centerpin. Maybe you can kind of break that down. What are the benefits? And then, why bead? Is it to get away from having actually the animal product or having to keep that fresh or?
Well, beads. The reason why beads work so well is number one is it's a natural presentation, right? It's a single egg presentation. So, we talk about the fish's metabolism. We haven't got into like threshold attraction factor and their mood based on water temp and what time of the season that we're in. There's just all kinds of arenas that we could go down. But at the end of the day, that single egg presentation that's just slowly tumbling and rolling and going down, a lot of times they're willing to bite that and eat that, right? And it's a deadly technique. And that's why, I wouldn't say that all steelhead anglers use beads because I've met guys that don't even use beads, right? Maybe they've tried them, they don't have confidence in them, and then I know cats that just wreck fish, right? They slay fish on beads, and they work really well. And I think that's one of the reasons why we can use the bead and be effective with it, is for the simple fact it's a smaller presentation, it's a single egg presentation, and it's natural. I mean, they're used to seeing an egg, especially up here in Michigan when the salmon are spawning. When those fresh fish come in, they set behind them salmon and they're eating those eggs. And then as far as the next part to your question concerning a center pin, one of the reasons why a center pin is so deadly is because you get that perfect drag-free drift, right? It's on a bearing, and it's literally going with the current, right? To where, like, if I use spinning reels too and float fish with a spinning reel, and you're kind of doing this, feeding line.
Line to come off, yep.
Yeah, you're feeding line, and you can get a drag-free drift that way. But the other reason why the center pin shines, there's two reasons in my opinion. Number one, we talk about trotting the float, right? And that's where we're going to slow that down a little bit and feather that spool with our finger, which causes that float to kind of tilt up like this, right? And what happens is when that happens, everything slides way out in front. So the only thing that they're seeing, right, is what's out here in front, right? And then, especially in colder temperatures, by feathering that spool and slowing it down, you're keeping that bait in the strike zone, right? And then the number two reason why I think center pins are so amazing is when you're doing that, when that float goes down, this hits that reel and locks it in immediately and set the hook. When you got a spinning reel, right, you got to click that bail over, reel in your slack, and then set the hook, right? Even on a bait caster, I mean, bait casters have become really popular for float fishing, and they work phenomenal. I actually love float fishing with a bait caster, Well, sometimes what I'll do is I just use my thumb to stop the spool and set the hook, but if you don't get a good lockdown on that, right? To where the center pin, we typically fish long rods, right? So we can pick that line up off the water quicker, and we can set that hook, and you just get a better hookup ratio on a pin. Now there's no drag, right? On most center pins, there's no drag. So there's pros and cons to everything. But I feel like a center pin is just a deadly technique for catching fish. So I hope that answered your question.
No, yeah, it definitely did. So if there's no drag, you're basically just using your palm to kind of slow the spool down.
Yeah, you're just palming the reel. You're palming the reel. Now there's a couple of reel manufacturers out there that have actually incorporated a drag into a center pin reel. I personally don't like that. I like the one-on-one. Some of the fish that you've seen me catch out west, all of those were caught on a center pin, right? Last year I caught them on a bait caster, and I actually had a drag to fight them. But it's kind of, I don't know. I just love to feel those fish. And at the end of the day, if it's not a giant and it gets off, I'm okay with that. If it's a big fish and I lose it, then that bothers you for a long time till you die, like you can't sleep, right?
Yeah, that definitely haunts you. Keeps you up at night.
Yeah. So
since we're talking about eggs, can you break down the three stages of the egg bite?
Yeah, pretty much. You have the fresh egg bite, right? Where they're just fresh, right? Literally, like I had mentioned about the salmon, they lay their eggs out on the stream floor, and not all of them stay right there, right? They start to tumble, but what happens is with the UV light, right? it just breaks down the color of the egg, right? And then you have the fresh dead egg bite, which is basically kind of in between. And then you have just the dead egg bite where that egg is completely washed out. You know what I mean? And what's really interesting is, dude, I'm not kidding you, man. We're talking, oh, man, you could go back 20 years ago, maybe. This guy that I knew that I met on the old Steelhead site from New York sent me these white beads with just the orange dots on them. And now manufacturers are coming out with those. But 20 years ago, dude, we were fishing those, right? And catching fish on them, and nobody else had them, right? Way, way back in the day. But because it was that washed out egg, and then it had the splotches of dots to add some contrast and some color, right? They were just wicked, stupid good, you know? And so what I tell anglers is, you know, if like, let's say you come to Michigan and you're going to fish the Manistee River for steelhead in the fall, not the salmon, but the actual steelhead, I would tell you to use a fresh egg, you know, like a translucent orange color, any of that stuff. And then as the season wears on, right, if I'm going to bead fish, you know, I might want to use the dead egg if the spawning season has been over. But at the end of the day, make no mistake about it. I've said this before in some of my articles I've written and in seminars through the years. The steelhead is the most color conscious fish on planet Earth, period. In a discussion, I will fight you to the death. They are color conscious fish, right? And so when the bite slows, you always change color. When the bite slows, change color, period. And so what I would tell a guy, if you're going out with beads, I'm not saying that just that one color bead is going to do it on a certain day, because I've seen days like that where that's the only bead that got bit, and it was just, you know, it was a rail fest. But at the end of the day, I would tell people to get several different colors of beads and the sizes, and you got to try different colors and sizes, because what you were catching them on at 9 a.m. at 1 o'clock may not do the trick, right? So,
right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm telling myself that I don't need a Centerpin.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I just try to throw out some nuggets to help some of them other anglers that maybe are trying to get into steelhead fishing, or they would like to catch more steelhead. They're just the most color conscious fish on planet Earth. And there's days, man, like when I'm plug fishing, pulling plugs for steelhead, I mean, there's days where that one color plug, right? It could be a non-rattle plug versus a rattle plug, but it's that one color, that thing just took all the fish, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And they're like that every day. And then you go back to the same river. You could even be running through the same holes or a different stretch of river, but you're fishing for the same fish that are in that river, and you can't get bit on that plug that day. It's a different plug, you know? And then there's times where I've told this story. There was a plug. It was a ghost shad. And on my home river, I caught my biggest steelhead I've ever caught there, which isn't that big. My fish are just Lake Erie steelhead. They don't get as big. And I caught it on a ghost color shad wrap. You know, a lot of guys don't run those for plugging, but in this deep hole, we were running that particular bait. And man, did we catch fish on that plug all season long. It was fantastic. Do you know, still to this day, I can't get bit on that plug in that color?
Really?
Dude, it was that 1 year, man. And so I got theories on that, different age classes of fish, you know, different genetics and different mindsets. I believe that all living creatures, whether they're fish or on land or sea or whatever, man, I just feel like they all got their own personalities, you know. And a lot of guys might think that's just a bunch of hogwash, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But the real fishy dudes that know how to whack fish, that catch fish consistently, they know exactly what I'm saying. That one year, man, there was that color of bait, and you can't buy a fish on it now, you know?
Right.
And it's not because that river was overpressured either. It was just that year with those conditions, with those water levels and temps and the amount of light that was going on. I don't know. That's my opinion on that. So
it almost makes me wonder. I don't know what the bait fish situation was, but maybe there was something that affected the color of the bait fish to turn them more pale. That maybe
yes, absolutely. And I've thought of all that. You know, it's like, you know, was it because this river I'm talking about does get shad. Now, we don't get them every year like we're supposed to at the right times. I've seen shad come in at the wrong times, and I've seen so many shad you could walk across the water on them. And then there's been years where I go, for the love of God, Lord Jesus, please bring me some shad. You know what I mean? Not only that, but for catfishing too, right? Because I fish for multiple species. But at the end of the day, that's a great point, and that might have had something to do with it. But it is what it is, right?
It's one of those things, I guess, if you don't realize it in the moment and you don't sample some bait fish and, you know, find some things to identify. I mean, looking back, it's just speculation, right?
Yeah, well, that's why I mentioned, you know, if you do harvest the fish, I release almost all of my steelhead. I keep a couple to smoke on the smoker and maybe for some eggs. But other than that, I release them all. And, but when I have kept them, I always look at their stomach contents, right? Because if they did eat something, it might tell you what they're eating or the size of the prey, right? The size of the prey is, I don't care what you're fishing for, right? Match the hatch. You've heard that before. So, yeah.
Well, we got a few more minutes left. I'm thinking, why don't we bring Atlee on and just give him a chance to throw a few questions your way?
Okay.
What you got? Bear with us just a second. The grandfather clock decided to go off.
Yeah.
Oh,
Speak up to nothing like live, right?
oh yeah.
What's your question, buddy? I'll tell you what, you got you're about like opening an encyclopedia of knowledge on fishing, and we don't even know where to start.
Yeah, well,
I do know this. I know years ago I took a pretty nice deer to the taxidermist, and then a year later I got lucky and so forth. But my taxidermist made the statement that 95% of big deer are taken by 5% of the hunters.
yes.
And there's a reason for that. And I'm guessing that 95% of big fish are taken by 5% of fishermen.
Yeah.
And it's because you're not relying on luck of the day, you're living it. And we live deer hunting. We're either scouting or working on trail cameras or fixing trails or walking land or whatever, you know, whatever the need. But it's year round. And I can tell.
It's interesting that you brought that up because I've talked about this years ago. Back in the day, in the summertime, I would take the jet sled down to the river. I had to make sure I had enough water to even launch the boat. But I also have another boat that, you know, I've taken out. But anyways, I've had several boats through the years, but when I had my drift boat especially. But what I would do is I would go in the summertime when it's low, and I would study what is going on with that river, find those depressions, find a rock that I never knew was there. I was literally pre-season scouting like I would if I'm hunting a big buck, you know, or a deer, and to figure out where I wanted to put my stand. And while I was there, I'm fishing a leech, a crayfish, night crawler under a float, catching smallmouth bass in the summer. Now, none of them were really big. that time of year because they're just, there's certain areas of my river. If you go up, you can find the bigger fish, and then early in the spring you can find the bigger ones. But in the middle of summer in this section, you just don't find fish maybe over 17 inches. It's smallmouth, a lot of 15 and under. But anyways, while you're scouting and you're marking and putting that pin on your fish finder, wow, look at that depression, man. Look at this boulder. I never knew it was there. Now, see, some of these things, like I wrote an article years ago. I think it was called the River Superhighway or something. This was years ago. But what I talked about is the river is an ever-changing place, right? Changes from year to year. And one year where you caught all these fish, you can go back there and you can't buy a bite. There's no fish there. Like the tree that was down, we had a blowout with the rise in the river and it blew it out and there's no structure there. But you find a boulder, right? Or a piece of concrete or something that's going to stay there, that's never going to move. You can go back to that spot, that piece of water, year after year after year, right? Like there was a spot on the Conneaut in Ohio that I fished a lot. And, I'm not going to tell you where the spot is, but everyone's heard of the Conneaut, and it's a very busy place these days. But there was something in the water that I'm going to just, that has never moved. It's never going to move. And them fish sat behind that every year, right? But if you hadn't went to that water when it was low and be able to look down there, right, and see, because the other thing too is when the river's moving, right, and the current is up and it's faster, it's hard to see down in there. In the dead of summer, when it's just really low and slow, or there might not even be a lot of water at all, man, can you unlock all those nooks and crannies that's going to hold fish that you never knew that was there by scouting, right?
Interesting. I think that's extremely important. One of the things that I love to do, I guess more so on inland lakes. I don't fish a whole lot of upper rivers. I guess just because there's so many people out there on the shoreline, right? Mm-hmm. But just anytime you get a chance when the water's low, just scout it.
Yeah.
Find those hidden gems that nobody knows about.
Well, not only that, another quick story is I took this outdoor writer out years ago. They did an article, and I took him out fishing on my boat, and I'll never forget it. Over near the shore, there was a one branch in the river, just one branch. And I said, well, why don't you go ahead and cast over there by that branch? And he questioned me. He goes, do you really think that there would be a fish sitting there in that? Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, he hooked 9 fish that day, okay, on a river that generally gives you 0 to 2 fish an outing, just saying. And I said, yeah, I really want you to cast over there. What do you think happened? The float went down. He set the hook, and I netted that fish for him. And he says, my God, I would have never thought in a million years that a fish would be sitting right there. And so the point to this whole story is to let you know that steelhead will exploit any and all current breaks, right? So even if you did your preseason scouting and you went in the summer and kind of found some depressions or maybe some boulders and other spots in a river that you never knew was there that might hold fish, as you're fishing, as you're going down the river, don't forget that key point, right? They will exploit any current break, even if it's just one stick sticking in the water, because that was just enough to attract that fish to hide behind that stick. As crazy as it sounds, that's how they are. So,
What else you got?
What else do I got?
I know you have, well, John said it best, you're an encyclopedia. We could sit here for probably 72 hours straight and not even scratch the surface.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. No, I mean, listen, I at the end of the day, if you fish long enough, you've learned a few things. And I did in Grand Rapids. I don't know. It might have been 7 years ago, but I did an all day clinic, and it was 6 hours long. We took an hour break for lunch, and I talked for a whole 5 hours, and we still didn't cover it all. I mean, you can spend an hour on barometric pressure or moon phase or the fish's eyesight. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It just depends on how far you want to take it. At the end of the day, color, size, profile, depth. Color, size, profile, depth. You master those four things, present the bait correctly to that fish and get it in the zone. And I don't care what you're fishing, right? If it's a fly, like a weighted fly or a jig, if it's a night crawler, a piece of shrimp, a cricket, a freeze dried, whatever, or maybe the Berkeley Gulp products, even those maggots, a spawn bag, a bead, a minnow. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. But if you present that bait correctly, because they're opportunistic feeders, right? If you present it correctly, get it in their face, get it in their space, they're genetically programmed. They like to hit things head on. I forgot to mention that. Steelhead are head on, man. You get it in their face, you present it correctly at the right speed, more likely you're going to get bit, right?
Yeah.
If it's something you haven't seen before.
And one thing I don't think we highlighted was just making sure that your presentation is going the same speed as the current.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell people, pay attention. I've often said this. I mean, when you walk up to a run, if you're walking and waiting, the first thing you need to do is sit down. Just sit down. Take a break for a second. Take a chill pill, man. Have a little Debbie Nutter butter, take a break. And just have your glasses on and look at the water. Study the stream. Look at the hydraulics of the water. What is the water doing? Where is that current break? Where is the flat water in that run, right? Because, theoretically, when you break it down, you should be breaking the water down in grids, like a grid. And you want to cover every piece of that water. You want to be slow and methodical and cover it all. And keep changing your depth if you have to make sure you're getting in the zone. But yeah, slow your roll, man. Study the water. Look at what you're looking at before you start picking it apart. Especially, another reason why it's a good tip is especially like in Ohio streams and other smaller streams all over the Great Lakes. We have these beautiful smaller rivers and tributaries. These guys come walking up with their waders, and they just step right in the water, and that's where the fish we're holding is right near the shore, right? That's why I say take a step back, you have your glasses on, take a chill pill, and just kind of study the water. And a lot of times, because those steelhead, they're very territorial, and usually the prime holding water for trophy steelhead, big steelhead, they're going to have the choice spot. But they're always kind of jockeying around and moving around, When it's like 33-degree water, you don't see that as much, right? They're just there swimming like a zombie. But they'll give their location away just by studying it before you start. Don't just walk in that river and step on the fish and spook all the fish, and just kind of slow your roll and enjoy the day, man.
Yep. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Not just catching a fish, but soaking it all in and, learning some things along the way.
Yeah.
And to catch a fish, you have to think like a fish. So
Yeah,
take a seat.
absolutely, man. No doubt about it, man. You got to be the predator, right?
Yep.
You got to get evil on the river.
Right. Awesome. John, did you and Atlee have any more questions?
Atlee?
Do you think Steelhead would live here in North Carolina?
What was that?
He said, do you think Steelhead would live here in our streams, or we don't really have the lake structure? We have some lakes, and I know
Yeah.
one lake here a few years ago, they put coho salmon in them, and they did well. But I've never heard of steelhead here.
Yeah, well, steelhead is basically, it's a rainbow trout. They just do something different than a rainbow trout does. But at the end of the day, I think it all boils down to water temperature. They require cold water. And then on top of that, you have to have your Department of Natural Resources that's willing to implement a stocking program. And we'll pick on Michigan for a minute. I mean, over 40% of the DNR's budget here is spent on stocking fish. That's a huge number.
Wow.
But if you did have places that was cold enough and had enough oxygenated water, right? It could be possible. I don't know. I've never heard of any steelhead down there, but hey, don't worry about that. Just get in the car and have your grandpa bring you up here and we'll get you a steelhead. How's that?
He already got a personal invitation from the master there, so
Nice.
we're gonna try to do that.
All right, that sounds good.
Oh yeah. And like Roger said, a steelhead basically is a migratory trout. So they leave the river, go into technically the ocean or a body of water like Lake Erie. But our fish, our eggs come from Washington State and Oregon anyway, so they're technically steelhead. They're just adapted to freshwater, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I guess you could kind of say that you kind of have steelhead, you kind of don't, because you do have rainbow trout. You just don't have a setting where they're able to come out of that tributary into like a giant body of water, right?
Right.
But more reason to come to Ohio. Get some steelhead, some walleye, and ask Roger. World class channel cats, Sandusky Bay.
Oh yeah. I love them. I love them catfish, man. They pull real hard in the summertime. Oh man. I love those big flatheads too. They trip my trigger. And at the end of the day, I'm a multi-species angler. If it swims, I like to fish for it and catch it. You've heard the tug is the drug, and it really is. At the end of the day, all of us are just out there to try to enjoy our time on the water and catch some fish. And, if you're going to eat a fish, I think a walleye and a perch was put here by God so they could go and get deep fried,
Oh, yeah.
Get the grease ready, boys. I like them.
I think if you fish enough, you have to be a multi-species angler. Because
you become a better angler, and that's what's helped me too. I've been fortunate enough to travel around the country, and I see how certain techniques and certain rigging is done a certain way, and certain colors work better there, and profile sizes, and just a host of different things. You're never going to learn it all, and that's the fascination of the sport. Is you thirst to get better. And I can tell you right now, Chuck, if I go fishing with you, I know I'm going to learn something from you. We can just all learn from each other. And that's why if you're a fly guy, if you're a kayak fisherman, if you're a troller, you're a stream fisherman that just walks and wades, or you're a guy that's on a jet sled, let's all come together and understand at the end of the day, we're all anglers and we're all passionate about the same thing. and let's all work together and educate one another to make this sport and fishery as best we can. We owe it to the fish, right? God gave it
Absolutely.
to enjoy, and let's take care of our fishery. And I promote catch and release. But if you're a perch or a walleye, I'm sorry, you're going in the cooler.
At the end of the day, you got to eat.
Yeah, yeah. Now, hey, listen, if our walleye fishery wasn't what it is in Lake Erie, I have
Right.
no problem putting them back. But we got plenty of walleyes to put in the cooler. Okay.
Yeah, there's so much fish that you know, the powers that be say basically if you stop taking fish, we're gonna have a problem.
100%. No doubt about it. So,
Just an abundance. Right.
yeah.
Cool. Well, it's been a great show. I wish we could sit here and talk steelhead all night. But we're almost an hour and a half in. I know Atlee's probably got to get to bed, and I'm probably about to fall asleep myself. It's been a long day. So, oh, before we leave, I do want to talk about Steelhead Manifesto. I meant to bring that up earlier in the show.
Yeah.
That's your group that you can head over to Steelhead Manifesto on Facebook and join the group. There's all kinds of great articles, great knowledge, great people. You know, at the end of the day, you surround yourself with good anglers, you know, and like Roger said, we can all learn from each other. It doesn't matter who I fish with. Like when I go fishing with Atlee, I'm sure he'll teach me something. You know?
Yeah, for sure. No, what's great about the manifesto, I think we're up to 65,000 members. What's great about the manifesto is it has brought many people together, right? And when you operate a group that big, I mean, I've got other pages that are even bigger. But when you got that many people together, there's always going to be a keyboard warrior, and we try to delete them or get rid of them because we don't want any of that crap. You know, you're always going to have to deal with that. But what's been great is I have personally become friends with so many people, right? From the East Coast to the West Coast. The forum has brought many people together. And not only that, I've learned a few things by what other people post and share. And, you know, if anybody wants to join, feel free to come on over. It's Steelhead Manifesto on Facebook. It's our group page. And I appreciate you mentioning that. And I appreciate all of our members. And I appreciate everyone that's shown support for me through the years. And I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I will definitely drop that link in the description after the show as well, and as well as Roger's link, probably some links to the articles and videos that we discussed, just to make things easier for you. And yeah, I think that's a wrap. I hope you guys got some great insight from the show. You know, talking to Roger, especially on the steelhead subject, it's just there's so many different factors and so many different variables that you can experience. And I mean, look at the that white bait situation. You know, you might only experience it once, but it could be a very valuable lesson. You know, so it's I don't know. I wish we could sit here all night. I have a whole list of deep dive questions, but I don't want to get too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Chuck, and maybe I can come on another time. We can talk about some other stuff. And anybody that did stop by or that may watch in the future, hopefully my ramblings helped a few people, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that's it for today. We will be back next Thursday. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Pretty sure we're on 8 p.m. until March. There is one that we're doing at 4 p.m. But I'll keep you guys posted. Definitely post the events and everything like that. And yeah, I'm gonna go get some rest. It's been a long day. and we'll see you next Thursday.